Marge said she wondered how they hold it all together.
Every department had kept track of their own things. So editorial, we had our system to keep track of things. We had on the Avid, and we had a number of layers that each one indicated what. And then we had different sequences. One was the cut sequence, one was the load sequences, one was the pre-cut sequence, and each one had its own thing. Now the internal lab, they had their own process, which we would sometimes go into and out of, but mostly they did their thing. The visual effects department then did their own process. So each department did their own.
In terms of tracking the motion that was used in any given shot, John and myself and Jim we would build up layer upon layer of different elements of captured motion and actors and elements like horses or props, and these things would be built and then given to the visual effects department, they would have to create EDLs for every single track and turn them over to our internal lab to process that and build them into a playable piece of a scene, a portion of a scene that Jim could put a virtual camera on.
When you take any one of those shots, and there could be hundreds, if not more, individual assets that had to be tracked and managed, and the show itself had a very extensive digital asset management system, which I couldn't even begin to tell you how it was organized, but it started from the creation of a single blade of grass or a tree or a leaf or a plant or a character or a piece of motion that was all tagged and saved and propagated throughout the entire process from the moment of its inception.
What was your department's process like?
Well, like I said, a lot of it was in the Avid. The Avid helped us organize things, and I don't think we did a lot of paperwork.
Well, between the Avid and the database.
Yeah, our accounts.
Right.
Database.
Our first assistant, Jason Gaudio, who's not here, did an amazing job. He set up a database that tracked everything, what are all the elements that are involved, the time codes for each element that was involved, what the main characters, the side characters, all the various other tiles of characters that we had in, like the stunt people or the horses or the amp suits and all that. Mm-hmm. So that database and the Avid is how we kept track of it. In editorial, we used various sequences and bins for each scene. So
a couple different types of...
Right.
So we didn't have to worry about wardrobe or props. We worried about the motion.
Right.
So we had our specific task, and we organized that, and visual effects organized that part, and then the internal lab added all of these other elements that accompany the characters.
So correct me if I'm wrong, like typically a scene would be the original motion capture that was done, the performance capture. Then there was the cut that we did of the performance capture. Then there was the camera loads that were set up for that performance capture. Then the virtual camera that was done on those camera loads, and then those were basically a new set of dailies, each one organized based on how the characters had been shifted, whether they had been shifted or not, or what elements were in there. So if you look at a daily sequence, you'd have maybe 4 cameras that were done, they were in sync with each other, and then maybe 18 or 12, or maybe just 2 performance capture references underneath. And then there was the edit that was done based on those.
Up until we started taking on these other vendors, it was a one-way thing. Everything went to Weta.
Yes.
And then when I got there, we had to add all these other vendors and get ready for it to all come back. So one of the first things I did was to try and attach all of these databases to each other so that in a single effort I could figure out, what was happening and coming from editorial and what the assets were that were attaching to this, and we could start tracking all the hundreds of thousands of pieces across multiple facilities. So it was fairly complicated.
Yes, it was. But it didn't happen by accident. nothing ever does. It was like Marge always said. It requires the human touch.